Media Mementos! Masters of Fate!
Okay, Masters of Fate Patreon members, I'm begging you, please give me something better than the Cleveland show this time. Frankenhole. Oh, okay, Frankenhole. Sure. After Moral Orel was cancelled for very stupid reasons, the crew behind that, most notably its creator, got a second chance at making a show for Adult Swim, and the result of that was Mary Shelley's Frankenhole. From what I've seen, this show has a mixed to positive reception. There are a lot of people out there that really like its irreverent style of humor and witty banter, and other people who say that it's not as good as Moral Orel. And for me, I say, well, you both got a point. It's not as good as Moral Orel, not even close, but as a show on its own, it's pretty good. The show is about Dr. Frankenstein, who has found a way to keep himself immortal, and now, through the power of magic wormholes, he's able to communicate with many famous figures from the past and help them with their problems. These figures are people like Lyndon Johnson, Gandhi, Adolf Hitler, and Michael Jackson? Interesting choice, but okay, I wouldn't expect anything less. The Doctor is surrounded by his uppity and vain assistant, his cheating wife, his henchman that just so happens to sound a lot like Shapey and Block from Moral Orel,
you got it!
And one of the very few book-accurate depictions of Frankenstein's creation in mainstream media. He doesn't have bolts in his neck or a square head, and he speaks in long, overdramatic poems. Can you tell he's my favorite character? It would have been so easy for the writing staff to go, hey, we've got Adolf Hitler, let's make a bunch of Hitler jokes for 22 minutes. But they didn't do that. Mostly because Frankenhole is 11 minutes, not 22. In all seriousness, though, much like with Moral Orel and the Christian/Davy and Goliath parody elements, they didn't take the easy way out. They decided to add a lot of banter, character-based jokes, anachronism, morbid dark humor, sexual innuendo, sexual overtones, and lots of references to the classic Frankenstein story, as well as other monster lore and horror stories out there. And yes, they've got the occasional, haha, look, we've got this famous person.
Laugh right.
But that doesn't take up a majority of the episode. In fact, it only takes up just a couple lines. For the most part, at least in the good episodes, they're able to balance that out with actual substance and jokes. I'd say that the humor in Frankenhole works about 80% of the time. Every so often, they'll dip into pop culture references or vulgarity for the sake of vulgarity. And those, I mean, they're not bad, but they're not great either, especially compared to what else we get. But they're fine. They don't last too long, so if you don't find them funny, chances are you'll find the next couple of jokes funny, and by then, you'll forget all about the one you didn't like. Now, how's about the story and characters? Well, there's not really much to talk about, is there? Moral Orel was cancelled because it got too real. That's what Dino and his crew wanted to make, and since they got cancelled for that, they knew they had to pull way back when they made Frankenhole, which is why we get next to none of it. It's a real shame too, because the kind of characters we've got going on here and the gothic atmosphere, it all would have been perfect, but I guess they were too scared of Adult Swim. With good cause, of course, considering how bipolar they can be. You can tell this is where they wanted to go, though. Not just because there's some semblance of character growth and nuance going on, although, again, not too much, but also because two of our main characters are basically transplants from Moral Orel. Dr. Frankenstein is what you would get if you made Clay the protagonist, and Mrs. Frankenstein is basically another take on Blabberta. She's even cheating on her husband with someone that has a connection to him, only this time, it's not his secret gay lover, it's his arch-rival Count Dracula. Goes without saying that these characters are nowhere near as interesting as Clay and Blabberta, but on their own, they're fine. They just don't get to be explored a whole lot because of the show's limitations. In a way, I see this as the return of Moral Orel Season 1, but on steroids. Season 1 of Moral Orel did have some story elements and character growth, but they were mostly kept in the background until the Christmas episode came around. Meanwhile, the humor took center stage. Though unlike Orel, we know that whatever's presented in Frankenhole isn't really gonna get much of a payoff, So you just gotta kinda take what you can get. Though I will say that in terms of Season 1 of Moral Orel versus Frankenhole as a whole, I'd say Frankenhole's humor is actually better. This is mainly for two reasons. One, we don't have things like God Chef or Waste dragging the thing down. Yeah, Frankenhole does have some outrageously vulgar moments, but they're not done in the same way that God Chef or Waste were, in that the only joke was,
"Ew, look what Orel's doing!"
The crew has very clearly learned from those mistakes, and have decided to build on their one joke to make something of substance. Whether or not it's good is kind of subjective, but at least it can be considered a lot more fleshed out than Waste or God Chef. And second, think back to what I've said about both shows. In my previous Moral Orel videos, I've talked about how it was a serious, dark show that was disguised as a comedy, while Frankenhole is just a comedy, plain and simple. Which means that the comedy is the main focus. That's what they put all their effort into, and boy does it show! Now, of course, I'm not saying that the art style or atmosphere aren't good, because they most certainly are, but the humor is better than in early Moral Orel, because that was their focus. They weren't trying to put in subtle hints for what was coming in the future, or talking about some kind of theme of the week. Frankenhole is just here to make you laugh. Also, like Moral Orel Season 1, Frankenhole kind of follows a similar formula, being that there's a character from the past who finds the doctor, they present a problem, the doctor solves the problem, and wacky shenanigans ensue. But with this kind of formula, it's a lot looser, which means that there's a lot more room to deviate from the norm. Moral Orel Season 1, on the other hand, basically followed the same structure every time. Orel is doing something, an authority figure tells him off citing something from God's word, Orel misinterprets it, he causes a problem, Orel gets spanked by Clay, Clay tells Orel a backwards lesson, which was the real thing he was supposed to learn, then there's a quick gag, and then the episode's over. With this, it's really rigid in its structure. If you break from it too much, is it still Moral Orel? The answer is of course yes, because Seasons 2 and 3 didn't really have that same flow, but with Frankenhole, that's not a problem. Every episode is at least different enough to differentiate itself from the rest. Truth be told, that's all I can really ask for. If they're gonna do Moral Orel Season 1 again, I'd ask for them to keep the good stuff but learn from their mistakes. And wouldn't you know it, they learned from all but one of their mistakes. The one that they didn't learn from was not to tick off Adult Swim. Let me give you a very abridged version of what happened. Moral Orel came out and it was a hit. It got too serious, then it got cancelled. The crew got one more chance and made a show that was just like Moral Orel was at the beginning. The network liked it, until they didn't, and then they cancelled it anyways for basically no given reason. From what I can gather, Frankenhole was cancelled because Adult Swim just wasn't interested. It wasn't failing, it wasn't too controversial, it did have a banned episode here and there, but on the whole it wasn't that bad. And it wasn't because of the nasty, raunchy content either, because it's Adult Swim. You can do anything on Adult Swim. It seems like they don't like Dino, and that's basically it. But cheer up, guys. We can always tune in to watch the next episode of the Moral Orel Frankenhole Sellout Show. So to recap, if you liked Moral Orel Season 1 and you wanted more of that, Frankenhole is your show. It's crude, it's crass, it's dark, it's witty, it's charming, and it's got its own unique flair. Is it as good as Moral Orel was? No. Is it as deep? Oh, absolutely not. But does it work on its own right? More often than not, yes. If you're a fan of Moral Orel, or if you just like dark humor and gothic culture in general, I'd say it's worth taking a trip down the Frankenhole to see if this show is up your alley. Also, I just have to explain a joke I made earlier. Yes, I know that Igor is played by the same little girl that played Shapey in Block, who just so happens to be the daughter of the creator. Yes, I know. Stop typing. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? What do you think of Frankenhole? And as if I even really need to ask, what show do you think is better? Moral Orel or Frankenhole? I definitely don't know what the answers are going to be, so comment below and let me know because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. And now it's time to thank our wonderful Patreon people, starting with our Masters of Fate, Manny Paredes, Kev, Leafstorm, Ryan Williams, Chan 11, and Woody Woo. And now for the executive producers. Unkale, Blackjack, Edward Haas, H.R. Hoffman, Who Else But Zane, YouTube Milkwad, Albert Robinson, I Am Fove, Aaron Vasquez, Ravioli Supremo, Wes Franklin, and Indiscreet One. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Media Mementos video, then why not donate to the Patreon? It doesn't cost too much, and there's a link in the description below for you to check out. And by the way, just to follow up from what I said at the beginning, this video came to you from the Patreon members who are in the tier of Masters of Fate. Once a month, they all convene to decide what crazy thing I'm going to talk about this month, and if you'd like to be part of their group, well, then just go back to what I said a few seconds ago about joining the Patreon, and you're gold. Alright folks, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm on a quest to find out why every episode of Moral Orel can stay on YouTube with basically no repercussions, while no episodes of Frankenhole can survive for longer than a month.